back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Stef Albiero. I'm here with the fantasy phenom, my guy Alex Lott. And we're getting into another mock draft. You already know this is mock draft season. We're getting into it, hitting the ground running. And we're doing a little bit different this time. We're going to do a 10-team mock draft with defenses and kickers. So those who have been around for a little bit know that we don't typically put kickers and defenses in our drafts, but we're doing it this time. We know a lot of your home leagues out there are going to have this exact lineup: one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a flex, a kicker, and a defense. So we got 6 bench spots loaded up here in this mock. Alex, real quick before we start, what's the difference in mindset and strategy when we go from a 12-team or a 14-team league down to a 10-team?
10-team leaguers, we heard you, because this is our first 10-team mock draft of the season, and we also heard you defense and kicker players, like Steph said, even though we don't have defenses and kickers in most of our leagues, but we're doing it for you guys, and we want to help you guys out with that. So super hyped about this draft, first of all. But to your point, Steph, the difference in strategy in a 10-team versus a 12-team or a 14, depth is not as important, for one, because in your 12-team, your 14-team league, sometimes the waiver wire can get a little bit thin. In a 10-team league, assuming you only have 5-6 bench spots, you're going to be able to kind of plug and play off of the waiver wire as the season goes on. So typically, if I'm not getting that top dog at any specific position, I'm willing to kind of wait a little bit and either stream the position or play off the waiver wire and make sure that I am just getting upside on my bench. So that's number one. Depth isn't as important. And number two is I want the upside. I want the difference makers, those tier 1 guys. Typically, Steph and I are both late quarterback. And at the tight end spot, it's kind of like I either want one of those top guys or I want to wait. In a 10-team league, I'm more willing to take a top-tier quarterback who can get it done on the ground, and I'm much more willing to want to get one of those top 3 tight ends, because that's how you're going to make the difference each and every week. Everyone, for the most part, is going to have good, if not great, running backs and wide receivers, but quarterback and tight end is how you can really get an advantage over the other people in your league.
Great point. Great point. And those difference makers are huge, and that's really all you should be looking for on your roster, because waivers are so deep and teams are so loaded that the floor for depth is so high that it really doesn't matter. But let's get started here. I'm drafting from the 101, Alex. You're at the 106, so we'll get 2 different perspectives here. We'll get the middle of the draft, these middle picks, and at the turn. And the easy pick for me, whether it's a 12-team, 14-team league, maybe even a dynasty, as long as we're not talking super flex, Christian McCaffrey is still that dude. He is still that guy you got to take number 1 overall. Not only is he a running back, which is the most scarce position, but we know the type of volume and reliance the Panthers have on him. Even last year in a down year and an injury-riddled season for McCaffrey, he was still an absolute stud on those weeks that he played. He still delivered, leading all running backs in fantasy points per game from those few games that he played. So I'm just going to smash here on CMC and really not think about it too hard. Kind of got a layup for the 101, and that's always, why you like the 101. And right after CMC, we saw that top 5 tier of running backs all go. So I know in some of these other mocks that we run, Fantasy Pros settings get a little bit of wonky. We'll see like Nick Chubb go 4th overall, or like Derrick Henry fall to the 3rd round or something weird. That's not happening here. This is actually how most drafts should start. McCaffrey, Cook, Kamara, Henry, Zeke. You don't get any safer of players than that. And Alex, that puts you in a tough spot here in the middle where, look, are you going to go Saquon Barkley, or are you going to get turned off by some of the injury concerns with him right now?
This is worst case scenario for me at the 6th spot, because I know we made a previous video that was essentially the top 6 picks of every draft should be the 5 running backs that went and Saquon Barkley. But with what I just said about tight end and quarterback being so important, no, I'm not going quarterback here. Do not go quarterback in the 1st round regardless. But that brings Travis Kelce into consideration for me at the 106, because he is someone that I think can truly make a difference for me compared to other teams in my league, where yes, if Saquon Barkley returns to his all-pro form, he could make a difference. But with some of those injury concerns, and then even with guys like Eckler, Aaron Jones, and then that entire next tier of running backs, the Mixon, Gibson, JT, Nick Chubb tier, I think I can still get two really good running backs in the next 2 rounds. So that's why I'm kind of considering Travis Kelce, because I think he is in a tier of his own, essentially, at the tight end spot. And at running back, while Saquon is tempting, I just don't know how much of a weekly advantage he's going to give me over some of those other guys. And honestly, maybe that injury, nebulous situation around him is turning me off to him a little bit here in the first round of the draft. So I haven't taken Kelce in the first round very often at all this season. So based on that 10-team strategy we talked about, I'm just going to roll the dice and go with Travis Kelce here at the 106, which I know is a little bit rich, but this is why we do mock drafts. In these 10-team leagues, I want to see how the roster shakes out if I go Travis Kelce in the first round. If my running backs come out super weak, if my receivers come out super weak, then maybe I go back to the drawing board and say, okay, Kelce isn't a consideration in the first round, but I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to go for it and see how this team shakes out with Kelce at my tight end spot. So after Travis Kelce, we saw some top receivers go off the board. Devontae Adams at the 107, and then some guys from that running back tier. Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley coming back in round 2. Tyreek Hill, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, and Stephon Diggs. So I'm back on the clock, and just because I think everyone's going to have good running backs and wide receivers doesn't mean I don't need to prioritize the position. So I am looking to the running back spot here. That is, of the two between running back and wide receiver, that's the more scarce. So I want to get one of those guys that's going to have volume on the ground and volume through the air, a true workhorse back in a PPR format. So the guys in consideration for me, although I love Hopkins and Ridley at wide receiver, I think I can get some good receivers later on. So at the running back spot, we've got Gibson, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Those are probably the 4 I'm considering. And you know who I'm going with here, Steph? It's Joe Mixon. It's a guy I've been super hyped about all offseason. Everything we wanted to happen for this Bengals offense happened, other than them drafting Penei Sewell in the first round. They ended up going with Jamar Chase, but they were able to improve the offensive line with a couple of smaller signings and draft picks. They were able to bring in a dynamic wide receiver that should help the offense, and they got rid of Giovanni Bernard, giving Joe Mixon the clear path to a workhorse role. All reports are that he's incredibly healthy heading into this season and looks good. So I'm going to lock in Joe Mixon as my RB1 and go with a little bit of an unorthodox Travis Kelce, Joe Mixon start to this draft.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Mixon, middle of the second. Assuming he stays healthy, should be a shoo-in RB1 with unlimited upside. We've seen glimpses of it. We even saw glimpses of it last year, granted, against the Jacksonville Jaguars last season. We still saw him explode and have that 40-point fantasy outing. So, gotta love Mixon there. After him, it was Najee, who I was really eyeing at this turn. Patrick Mahomes going at the 207, so super high ADP for Mahomes, or super high draft slot for Mahomes in this 10-team league. And I think you're going to see that a lot, especially in your home leagues. Guys that are, to the point made earlier, going for difference makers at these respective positions, QB and tight end. You got to have those guys secured, especially in a 10-team. But let's see who's on the board for me here. Still have a lot of good options, a lot of good wide receivers. A.J. Brown's calling my name. Antonio Gibson's calling my name. I'm probably going to grab one of those two guys. But back to that point from earlier, getting high-level tight ends and quarterbacks matters a ton. And for where I'm at, especially drafting from the turn, a lot of names are going to go off the board before I get my next chance to pick. So I know one of these two picks here at this turn is going to be Darren Waller. And Darren Waller is firmly my tight end 2 this season. I'll be talking about him later on this week when we get into our fantasy MVPs for this year. Oh, boy. Because I think Waller is set to go bananas. Not only is it now year 3 of him being the primary passing game option for the Raiders, they really didn't do much as far as bringing in other weapons for him to compete with. It's John Brown as really the only new receiving threat there. Bryan Edwards, Henry Ruggs, we expect these guys to ascend as they continue to progress in their careers. But as it stands right now, that's not formidable competition for Darren Waller, who actually saw more receptions than Travis Kelce last season. So essentially I'm getting Travis Kelce's production. Granted, we're going to the Raiders and not necessarily the Chiefs, and that's where some of the capped upside is. But just the funneled volume situation for Waller makes him super appealing. So I'm smashing on him here at this 210 and securing that difference maker at the tight end position. And Honestly, man, there's a lot of good wide receivers still on the board. If you guys haven't checked out our wide receiver tiers, where we went through 48 wide receivers, put them all into rankings, like we got a lot of guys that are still in the top tiers on the board, from Ridley, Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb. We both are really high on Amari Cooper this year. And knowing that all those receivers are there and knowing that the depth is certainly going to be there because it's a 10-team league, I'm going to go for another guy that I believe has unlimited potential in his offense and a guy that I'm really excited about. He may be in the running for another fantasy MVP for me. It's Antonio Gibson. And I'm stacking him with Christian McCaffrey. So two guys that are in the Turner system, guys that are going to be relied upon heavily as pass catchers in their offenses and have a track record of getting it done. And we know Antonio Gibson can get it done on the ground. He got it done through the air in college. And all signs, whether it's Ron Rivera talking to the media, whether it's his utilization in camp and preseason, Antonio Gibson is set to have a monster season. All indications are that he's going to be used a ton this year, and he already secured that goal line role last season over Peyton Barber, over J.D. McKissick. Neither of those guys scare me at all. If you want to see a full breakdown on Antonio Gibson, go check that out on our channel. We have a full playlist that we call the 2021 Fantasy Draft Kit. You can go and see pretty much any player. You just go search their name in that playlist on our YouTube channel. You'll be able to find and see a quick breakdown of their outlook and projection for 2021, what we believe based on the offseason moves and their ascension as a player, what they're going to do this year. So Gibson was the easy pick for me after that Waller pick, and now I'm coming out of the first 3 rounds with 2 very, very strong running backs, guys that I consider to both be shoe-in RB1s and a difference maker at the tight end spot.
I love that roster build, Steph. And these 10-team leagues, we can't touch on it enough. The tight end upside is important, and then also having those solid running backs is important because especially in 10-team leagues, you mentioned it, some of that receiver value is going to be available in round 4, 5, and 6. There's a really good value pocket of great wide receivers that are going in that range, and you're going to see it through our teams here. I don't know who's going to be there, but I know we're going to end up surprised at some of the wide receiver names available to us later on, because I'm leaning running back at this pick as well. After Antonio Gibson went Calvin Ridley, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown. And honestly, at the 306, it's surprising to see George Kittle still on the board. If I would not have gone Travis Kelce in the first, that would be a smash pick for me. And honestly, if I had known George Kittle was going to make it here, I think I might have gone Saquon Barkley in round 1, but I just wanted to lock in that secured tight end, and there was no way of me knowing. So if you are in the middle of the 3rd round or the middle, picks of your draft, maybe you roll the dice and wait until the 3rd round and go after a Darren Waller, go after a George Kittle. Certainly possible for them to fall there, but you're playing a dangerous game because the second those first 3 tight ends are off the board, you're probably going to wait a couple rounds before you want to pick that next tier. But at this 306 spot, I am going to go back to the running back spot. I'm going to start my draft exactly like you did as far as roster construction goes in these first 3 rounds. And there's a name that stands out to me at running back. It's DeAndre Swift. This is a PPR league that we're drafting for, so I know the Lions offense has a lot of question marks, but the thing is, Jared Goff is not total dust. Like, this is not some Mike Glennon, Nathan Peterman type of disaster in Detroit. Like, he has still been able to support fantasy football weapons in the past. He still was a number 1 overall draft pick who had some good, he played in a Super Bowl for crying out loud. So I know he is not as good as Matt Stafford. I know there's a lot of question marks. I know the receivers are question marks. But DeAndre Swift, to me, even if the touchdown upside is a little bit lower, I think his volume is going to be better than we're expecting, especially through the air. Now, Jamal Williams is going to get his in this backfield. But last year, DeAndre Swift was a rookie. Adrian Peterson was there, took a lot of touchdowns, took a lot of the groundwork away. I think DeAndre Swift is going to see 4 to 5 targets a game, which is incredibly valuable for us in PPR formats. And even if he gets that 12-ish carries per game with a couple of touchdowns sprinkled in here and there, he's going to have a really good floor on a week-to-week basis. And I love him as a player and as a talent. So I'm going to go DeAndre Swift here and start out Travis Kelce, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift. And you and I both are going to be looking for those receiver values in the middle rounds.
And everything's working out for DeAndre Swift, whether it's the funneled volume because of the lack of receiving weapons in Detroit, whether it's Penei Sewell coming in, whether it's the defense being awful, like everything's kind of aligning right now for Swift to go out and produce. And he has a head coach and an offensive coordinator that have been a part of systems where you have Austin Eckler and Alvin Kamara putting up monster target volumes, some of the top target shares at the running back position in the entire NFL. So Swift is in line for a ton of that pass catching work. And he's a good player. I mean, he was a stud prospect. We both had him firmly at the top before the draft coming in from Georgia. But after you took Swift, it was Robinson, it was Keenan Allen. Kittle ended up going at the 309. I think that's pretty good value there for Team 9, who's starting their draft. JT, Nick Chubb, George Kittle, Josh Allen. I mean, that's textbook as far as I'm concerned, is how you want to start one of these drafts with that tremendous value on Kittle and go ahead and locking up Allen there. And then we saw J.K. Dobbins, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, and David Montgomery go at this 3-4 turn. So back to you at the 405, and you still don't have a wide receiver. Good news is your boy, Amari Cooper, is sitting there for you.
You read my mind. I mean, you know who I'm taking here. This draft is going incredibly well. I was able to lock up the elite tight end. You know, Joe Mixon is one of my guys. He's in consideration. I wouldn't say it's locked in consideration to be a fantasy MVP. And another guy strongly in consideration is Amari Cooper, and that's going to be my pick. It's good to see that you and I are both kind of getting our guys in this draft as well, on top of just constructing the roster the way that we want to in these 10-team leagues. So Amari Cooper is the pick for me. You know, I'm getting him here in the 4th round to be my wide receiver 1, and there's no reason to believe he's not going to be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year. We're so quick to forget what these guys can do. I know it was a small sample size last year, but in the games that Dak played, it was not a lot. It was like 4 games. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 1. So I know CeeDee Lamb's coming on strong. You and I both expect huge things from CeeDee Lamb, but look at this draft board, and I'm seeing this all over the place. Underdog, in these mock drafts, even in some real leagues, CeeDee Lamb in redraft is going over Amari Cooper. Is it possible for him to take over as the most valuable fantasy football asset on this team this year? Definitely possible. But Amari Cooper is that incumbent number 1, and he's going to continue to dominate. So I'm going to lock in Amari Cooper at the 405. He has wide receiver 1 overall upside in 2021. Obviously not projecting that, but he's one of those guys that I really think can do it. So I feel good about Amari Cooper. He's given us a really good sample size over his career, putting up great production, and I'm feeling great about this team.
And you were spot on with that prediction that one of these strong wide receiver 1s was going to fall to you, and I think you might have got the last guy in Amari Cooper, you know, that at least that I would feel locked and loaded at the position. I have 2 running backs and a tight end. So based on this roster construction, this is where I really need to look at wide receiver. Granted, there's no one I really love as a set it and forget it wide receiver 1 on this board right now. Deontay Johnson is a team's wide receiver 1. The rest of these guys are in ambiguous situations. Like Tyler Lockett's playing the number 2 just from a fantasy production standpoint, not from a target share standpoint, to DK Metcalf. Julio Jones is set to be the number 2 behind A.J. Brown in that Titans passing game. DJ Moore, a lot of questions with him getting outproduced by Robbie Anderson last year. Cooper Kupp has Robert Woods to contend with, and Godwin has Mike Evans to contend with. So we're in a really interesting point in this draft, and this is a tier that's exciting. It's really, really fun, but don't really feel great with any of these guys as my wide receiver 1. Kind of kicking myself for that Antonio Gibson pick. Could have gotten a guy like a Calvin Ridley, a Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown to really secure up that wide receiver position. But nonetheless, I am going to go with at least 1 wide receiver here. Actually, 2 of them. I'll go ahead and stack them here at this turn. And 1 is an upside play, and 1 is hopefully a consistent floor play. So the first one is going to be Cooper Kupp. I took him in the last mock draft that we've run. He just has a level of upside and ceiling that he just never had with Jared Goff there. Now that we get Matt Stafford into the offense, a guy who's been consistently one of the deepest passers over the last decade in the NFL, we know he has that ability to go for almost 700 pass attempts if the team situation requires it. Not expecting that in LA because they do have a very good defense over there. But the fact that Cam Akers went down means that this team has no super reliable RB1. Like Darrell Henderson is not the answer for them. We'll see if any of these, undrafted guys can come out and produce for them. But what this means is that the passing game in LA is going to be fun this year. And I know they brought in some other weapons, some downfield speedsters with Deshaun Jackson, Tutu Atwell, but Cooper Kupp should be that dude. We know that McVay has relied on him in the red zone pretty much the entire time that he's been there. And now he's a few years away from that ACL injury. So I like Kupp a lot this season. Now for my next pick here, and this might be a reach to some, but based on my roster construction and based on what we're talking about here, going for difference makers, and I'll even talk a little bit more about the stack that I'm eyeing, and it's going to be pretty obvious which one I'm looking for. because I'm grabbing Tyler Lockett here.
I knew it.
And I know he's the boom bust name of the century, but Tyler Lockett out-targeted DK Metcalf last year. We know the rapport is there with Russell Wilson, and they just signed Tyler Lockett with top 10 in the league wide receiver type money. So I expect him to continue to be utilized. Is he going to come out and put up 30 points a game? No, and that's not what I'm drafting him to be. But I am drafting him to be a guy that can go out and win me weeks when things break his way. We've seen the 50-point outings from Lockett last year and was a top 12 wide receiver. The track record's there. I'm going with Lockett, and I'm hoping that later on in this draft I can circle back on Russell Wilson to create a nice stack. And let me talk about stacking for a second, guys, because this year, stacking is the move. And a lot of people have put out the data and the analytics behind it, but essentially think about it like this. Think about it as a parlay, right? If you want to put a bet down and you say, hey, I want to double down on my bet. Well, the best way to do that, on top of minimizing things that need to go right for you to smash in fantasy, is for you to grab a wide receiver and their QB on that same roster. Well, yes, the floor does become a little bit lower. We're out here trying to win leagues. You know, most of the time you're only getting paid out if you're top 2, top 3 in your league. And I know there's punishments for last place, but I mean, you can avoid last as long as you play the waiver wire in your home leagues. What we're going for is winning these leagues, and to maximize that potential ceiling, that fantasy point output, having Lockett and Russell Wilson together on the same roster. Hopefully I'm not, kicking myself because I'm telling you my whole strategy now, Alex, but by drafting Tyler Lockett, I'm essentially saying that I expect Russell Wilson to have a good season as well. So might as well secure both of those boom weeks together on this roster. But Alex, after I went Lockett, it was Godwin, it was Julio, it was Darrell Henderson, still going way too early in these drafts, in my opinion. We've never seen him truly take over that RB1 role. And then Adam Thielen at the 505. So back to you in the 5th round. And based on your roster construction, I think you can go really any position with this pick.
First of all, I love the Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp picks there. I mean, this is illustrating what we've been talking about this whole time because, yeah, Cooper Kupp and Tyler Lockett might not be the most exciting upside wide receivers. Like you look at Team 2, who has DK Metcalf and Calvin Ridley, who they picked in rounds 2 and 3. You obviously would much prefer DK and Ridley to Kupp and Lockett. But the difference between those guys isn't, it's not falling off of a total cliff because Kupp and Lockett have upside in their own right. But then you look at Team 2's running backs, Dalvin Cook and Mike Davis, and that is just significantly weaker to me than Christian McCaffrey, Antonio Gibson. So you're already getting that, upside at other positions if you wait and take those round 4, round 5, round 6 wide receivers. And then you also factor in that team doesn't even have a tight end yet. So you have Darren Waller. Who's their tight end going to be? It could be a Kyle Pitts or Mark Andrews if they make it to the back of round 6, which I don't expect. But most likely it's going to be a Tyler Higbee, a Noah Fant, one of these flyers. And you're going to have such a big advantage with Waller over one of those guys compared to like a DK Metcalf versus a Tyler Lockett. On any given week, Lockett could easily outscore DK. It's going to happen more times than we think this season. So with the 6th pick of the 5th round here, I'm looking back at the wide receiver spot for my team, and I'm deciding between several different guys. DJ Moore, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase all pop out to me. This would have been a smash Tyler Lockett pick for me if he would have fallen to me here. But this is really, really difficult because DJ Moore has a lot of question marks. He's fighting for targets with 2 other guys in Carolina and Christian McCaffrey, so really 3 other guys. I love the talent. I love how he can stretch the field. But I just don't know how many touchdowns Sam Darnold's going to be throwing for the Panthers this season. And then with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, I'm excited about the Bengals offense as a whole. I do already have Joe Mixon, but I think the Bengals offense is going to step it up to be, from a pure volume perspective, efficiency aside, one of the most high volume offenses in the NFL. So having Joe Mixon doesn't necessarily turn me off to taking a Bengals wide receiver. And this is a question we get a lot. Should you draft a receiver or running back if you already have a receiver or running back on that team? And I'm okay with it if the players are talented because no, you can't get points from Mixon, Higgins, and Chase on the same play. But there is some correlation there where, okay, maybe if it's if Joe Mixon's not getting the points, then you have a better chance of T. Higgins or Jamar Chase getting the points there. So you mentioned stacking for that upside. And taking running backs and receivers on the same team, as long as it's a good team, can be another way to get correlation in your roster in the opposite way. That's like, okay, maybe I'm protecting myself and giving myself a higher floor, but either of these players could still give me a boom week. And honestly, they both could have a boom week at the same time. So I'm actually going to take T. Higgins. I'm going to go with the second-year guy in Cincinnati. I know Jamar Chase just as easily could have been picked there. I think he's going to be great as well, but I liked what I saw from Higgins last season, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that in.
Yeah, I like Higgins, man. We've talked about him a ton on this channel. Go check out the videos that we've done breaking down his situation, and there's a strong likelihood that this could be a ramp-up year for Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins is the one there as the heir apparent to A.J. Green. Both guys look very similar on paper when you look at their size, their speed, their measurables. But after T. Higgins, it was Miles Sanders, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase went. Kyler Murray went at the 601, so Lamar Jackson starts to become really appealing here as the last one in that tier. Brandon Ayuk went off the board, who I would have loved to have as my next pick. And then you called it, right in line with ADP. Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews go back-to-back at the beginning of the 6th. So back to you at the 605. Again, you can go anywhere with this pick. Could even go QB.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. It doesn't change for me in a 10-team league. If Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray makes it to round 6, it's a done deal. So Lamar Jackson's the pick. It's really fulfilling that strategy we talked about with the quarterback position. You want to get that extra upside, a guy who's going to give me an advantage against most other quarterbacks on any given week. I don't want to be stuck with, a Matt Stafford, a Joe Burrow, a Trevor Lawrence in a 10-team league, and a 12-team and a 14. That might be fine. But if you get stuck with one of those guys in a 10-team league, you got to think the other teams have Mahomes, Josh Allen, Dak, Lamar, Kyler, Russell Wilson. So over half of the teams are going to have a significant advantage against you every single week. I want to lock in one of those guys for myself. So Lamar Jackson's the easy pick for me here in the 6th round.
Nice. And after Lamar, we saw more quarterbacks fly off the board. Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Kenny Galladay, and TJ Hawkinson all went. Luckily for us, we both have our tight ends secured up. You now have your quarterback, and I'm going to jump on that quarterback train as well. And look, this just comes down to knowing your ADPs. I knew from most of the drafts that I've done, whether it's on Underdog, whether it's in the redraft mocks that guys are posting in our Discord channel. If you guys want to start running mocks, get ready for the season, join our Discord and hop into a mock draft with us. We got folks posting those every single day that you can hop into, whether it's 12-team, 10-team, 14-team leagues. But I'm going to go Russell Wilson. I knew he was going to be there. I banked on it. It happened, so I feel really, really good. I feel very, very validated that I know what the heck I'm talking about here when it comes to these ADPs. And now I lock in that Lockett Wilson stack. And now, as my next pick here on this turn, I really can go anywhere. So I have my tight end secured. I have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and now my QB secured. So let's see who's on the board. And again, we're prioritizing upside in this scenario. And a guy that stands out to me as one of the biggest upside names potentially in the entire draft board. This might be a hot take to some, but Alex, you're not going to be surprised. I think I'm going to go Travis Etienne with this one as a guy that I think could do some crazy things in 2021, even as a rookie. We know he has the first-round draft capital. We know he's super explosive. I mean, back-to-back 1,600 yards seasons at Clemson. Blew up in the passing game as a senior. A lot of people were opposed to Etienne coming back for that senior year, and everything that he's supposed to do if he's an elite prospect, he did do at Clemson. And this is a guy that doesn't need a ton of carries to be valuable. He's known for his efficiency. He's known at breaking away big plays. I don't remember the stat off the top of my head right now. You can go back and look at the Travis Etienne breakdowns that we did during the offseason, but Etienne, something like 40% of his touchdowns were from the 50-yard line or farther. So this is a guy that can take any play to the house. At worst, I expect him to be a passing game option behind James Robinson. And at best, he's the clear RB1 with J-Rob taking over that plotter, maybe even goal line role. But Etienne, I think, can still smash. I view him as very much like a DeAndre Swift, Miles Sanders type of guy. So for an RB3 that could potentially go bananas in an offense with his college QB and a coach that went out and took him in the first round when they really didn't need running back, I got to believe Etienne's going to get utilized. The hype is real for me with Etienne.
I like the pick there. And honestly, the fact that that was your RB3 makes me like that pick even more, because we saw guys on the board like Josh Jacobs, Kareem Hunt. And to me, if that was going to be your RB2 and this is a player that was going to have to start for you week 1 on, I almost would have preferred a safer play, a Josh Jacobs, a Kareem Hunt. The upside isn't quite there, but they should give you a higher floor. With ETN, you have a much higher upside than those other guys, and you're able to wait and see how he looks and watch him get ramped up as a rookie. So I love the pick, Steph, after ETN when Aaron Rodgers, Odell Beckham Jr., Juju, and Chase Claypool. I was eyeing Chase Claypool as my flex, so that's incredibly disappointing to see him get sniped from me. And I'm on the clock here, and I'm in that same situation. I'm looking for an RB3 or my wide receiver 3, someone to be my flex. And Josh Jacobs and Kareem Hunt are there, but because I don't need them to be my starters right now, I am really looking for upside at the running back position. I see Javonte Williams there. I'm hoping he can get back to me next round. So I'm really looking at the wide receiver spot. Robbie Anderson, Cortland Sutton, Tyler Boyd, Jerry Jeudy are the top names on the board. Antonio Brown is there as well. He's interesting, someone I like taking late in drafts. So this is a really tough one. Chase Edmonds, I certainly like his upside as well, but I am going to go to the wide receiver spot. I like Cortland Sutton here from the Denver Broncos, coming off of an injury, missed the entire 2020 season essentially, but I know the quarterback play is in question, but Cortland Sutton is an alpha wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy should be fine there as well, but I think this Broncos offense should at least be able to support Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy as wide receiver 2. So as my flex, someone I can plug in with confidence every single week, and a guy who has tremendous touchdown upside, a fantastic skill set in terms of going up and high pointing the ball and coming down with some fantastic catches. As my flex, I feel really good about it. I can take some more upside shots later on in the draft and see if some guys break out that have a little bit wider of a range of outcomes. So I'm going to lock in a rock solid Cortland Sutton here in the 7th round. And hopefully I can come back to the running back spot in round 8.
Yeah, no, a great thing to remember about Sutton. Back in his 2019 season, the Broncos were on a QB carousel, and it wasn't pretty. It was Brandon Allen, it was Joe Flacco, and it was Drew Lock in his first couple starts, and Sutton was still an absolute monster in Denver, had a 35% dominator. What dominator means is percentage of the total team's passing game production, so touchdown, yards. And Sutton was 6th in the NFL with a 35% dominator. Sutton can carry a passing game on his own. So now you add in, hopefully, more consistent QB play, whether it's Drew Lock ascending or Teddy Bridgewater continuing to be that, dink and dunk game manager that can just keep the drives alive. Sutton's really, really interesting for me, especially what he can do in the red zone and downfield. But after Sutton, we saw Brady and Stafford go off the board. Michael Thomas goes in the 7th round. Josh Jacobs, Devonta Smith, and then all those RB2s you were talking about earlier, Kareem Hunt, Myles Gaskin, James Robinson as a guy that I actually don't mind taking. Maybe not this early, but a guy that I've kept my eyes on because a lot of folks are leaving him for dead, and we saw him be used as the RB1 in the preseason. So something to keep an eye on with J-Rob there. But Alex, it's leaning running back at this point. Your boy Javonte Williams did fall to you. Is that the pick here?
I'm actually going to bypass Javonte, and I'm going to go Chase Edmonds. And I really do think Javonte Williams has more upside, but Chase Edmonds, to me, as my RB3, has enough upside in his own right, and I think he has a much higher floor for my team. Edmonds, especially in a PPR league, bare minimum, he's going to get the same role he had last season, plus a little bit more because we saw the departure of Kenyon Drake, essentially swapped out for James Conner. So Chase Edmonds, to me, has an RB2 type of floor, but Cliff Kingsbury has given him really a vote of confidence again and again and again this offseason. So at a minimum, I think I'm getting a good flex, a guy I can plug in as an RB2 if I need to, and a really good versatile option for my lineup. But if we do see Chase Edmonds more involved than we think, if we do see him get more work inside the 20 than we think, if we do see him get closer to 15 carries a game rather than 8 to 10 carries a game along with his receiving workload, Chase Edmonds, to me, has top 15 upside this season in a high-powered offense. So I'm going to go Chase Edmonds here. I like Javonte as well at this point in drafts, but I'm just going to lean Edmonds on this one because of the offense, essentially. I think the Arizona offense offers a little bit more upside and security than Denver at this point. So Edmonds is going to be my pick.
Yeah, Edmonds should be a lock for 1,500 yards from scrimmage this year. Was top 10 in yards per touch last season, and should continue to ascend in every single facet of his position. Like, he should get more carries, more targets, should be on the field more. And James Conner isn't somebody that scares me if I'm Chase Edmonds. So, like that pick there. And you don't have to wait for him to ramp up like we might need to wait for Javonte Williams.
Exactly. And Steph, one more thing to add. I know I mentioned earlier, I don't mind taking a running back and receiver on the same team as long as I believe in the players in the offense. I did just take Cortland Sutton in round 7. And with Javonte Williams, I actually felt like I was fading him in round 8 because I just took a Denver Bronco in round 7. And the difference between, taking Mixon and T. Higgins and Javonte and Cortland Sutton is just the offensive output. I think the Bengals are going to be incredibly high volume, and Denver has a lot of question marks. So I really didn't want to double down on the Denver Broncos in some of these key mid-rounds with some of these upside shots. I think there is a range of outcomes where Sutton and Javonte certainly have fantastic seasons, but with Denver, if the wheels do fall off, I just don't want to be caught holding the bag with two guys on an offense that personally I don't believe in. So that's the difference when you're looking at drafting some of these receivers, running backs, whoever it is on the same team. You just want them to be tethered to offenses that you truly believe in.
So, Alex, I already have my 2 picks here at the 8-9 turn ready to go. And I'll break them both down. The first one is Javonte Williams. No idea how he made it back to me here. We saw James Robinson,
value.
Trey Sermon all go over him.
Mm-hmm.
Made the decision easy for me there. And, we're talking about like how much we like Javonte Williams. He comps very well to David Montgomery from the Bears. So essentially copy and paste David Montgomery, put him in Denver, and this could be a very, very strong RB2 and could take over a lot sooner than we think. I mean, think back to last year with guys like J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, a lot of these running backs where there was an incumbent starter. But what the NFL has shown us is that when they go and get a running back early in the draft, like the Broncos did trading up in the second round to get Javonte Williams, it means they're going to put the pedal to the metal and they're going to use this guy. Running backs get used up early and often, and there's less time for them to get onboarded compared to any other position in the league. So I'm going to go Javonte Williams as that first pick there. And now I get ETN and Javonte Williams. I have to feel like at least one of those picks is going to pay off in a big, big way.
I love that.
And can fill out my flex spot. I kind of get the luxury now of waiting for ETN and Williams to ramp up. Whoever ends up smashing can just fit into that flex spot. I am a RB in the flex type of guy. So I feel really, really great about that pick. And then the next one, talking about upside, it seems to be the recurring theme on pretty much all of our mocks. You probably sound like a broken record, upside, upside, upside. And there are some upside names. Damian Harris is really, really appealing here. DJ Chark is another one that's exciting. You guys know I love Jalen Hurts if you've watched any of our stuff this year. But if we're talking about upside, and I gotta talk about the Houston Texans pullover I got on here, Brandon Cooks is the pick. And the reason Brandon Cooks is the pick is at worst, he's on a bad offense, but he's the wide receiver one that should see funneled volume because he doesn't have much to compete with as far as the other receivers there. And then at best, he's Deshaun Watson's number one option. I mean, we don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to play. He is at camp. He's participating in padded practices. All things point to him playing this year. So
I don't know about that.
The closer we get to the season, the more confident I am that Watson's going to play. And if Watson plays, I mean, I just got an absolute steal here at the 901.
Yeah, I mean, difference of opinion. I honestly think there's little to... I'd give a 10% chance of Deshaun Watson playing for the Houston Texans this season. But to that point, that's probably 10% higher than I thought it was a little while ago. So we're still going to have to see what happens. He has been kind of oddly in and out of practice, but the fact that he's even around, hanging out, going through some of the team stuff is definitely encouraging. And even with that being said, and that's a difference of opinion, if you're someone that believes Deshaun Watson's going to play for Houston this season, this is, Brandon Cooks would be going in the 5th round if that was the case, the 6th round, probably the 6th round if that was the case. So you just got a 2-round discount, 3-round discount on this guy if you truly believe that. And even if you don't, even someone like me who thinks it's little to no chance that Deshaun plays for Houston this season, I still like the pick because no matter who the quarterback is, no matter if they're one of the worst teams in the NFL, typically you don't want to pick players on bad offenses. But like Brandon Cooks is the only real player of note in Houston this season. The running backs are a mess. They have a huge list of veteran wide receivers, Chris Conley, Anthony Miller, amongst others. So Brandon Cooks is going to get a lot of the funneled volume in Houston, even if it is a low volume offense. So I still like the pick. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson. If we get word on him one way or another before camp, Cook's ADP certainly will rise or fall. But if you're drafting before we get any news on it and you want to take an upside shot in the 9th round, I certainly don't mind it one bit. But after Cooks went off the board, we saw Raheem Mostert, DJ Chark, Deebo Samuel, and Tyler Boyd. And Steph, you made this one easy for me because I thought you were 100% going with this player. He gets picked by you or I in every single mock draft we're in. We've talked about him time and time again. We're going to keep hammering it home. Laviska Shenault's the pick. And it's back to, that high volume offense situation and that breakout potential situation. He is literally like another T. Higgins type of flyer, but you're getting him 4 rounds later. It's going to be a high volume offense in Jacksonville. They have a top young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. And there's going to be volume to go around for DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and Marvin Jones. But I actually think Laviska Shenault has a really good chance to lead this team in targets and be the true number one. And if you have the guy who's, 1, incredibly talented, 2, has a top young quarterback, and 3, it's a high volume offense, what more do you really want? So in the 9th round, I'll take a shot on Laviska all day. I don't have to start him. I can wait and see how things go for the first couple weeks of the season, see how Trevor Lawrence looks, see how his snaps and targets look, and go from there. So that's just an absolute steal, smash pick for me all day long in the 9th round.
Yeah, I mean, we can't stop talking about Laviska Shenault on this channel.
Draft
him everywhere.
Unless you're in
draft
my
him
leagues.
Everywhere. When you get to this phase of the draft, and I think back to names like Stephon Diggs last year or Robbie Anderson last year, where they weren't necessarily like guys that you wanted on every roster, but they ascended well past their ADP. Laviska Shenault is in line to do that, even if things are just okay for him. Not everything even has to go his way for him to be an absolute stud this season. But Alex, you're on the board again after we saw our first defense go off the board in the Rams at the 907.
Don't do that.
Bunch of wide receiver upside names: Devontae Parker, Michael Gallup, Mike Williams, Michael Pittman, Michael Carter, David Johnson, Leonard Fournette went at this running back tier that we're in. So who are you going with? Now we're in the double-digit rounds at the 10:05. We both have tight end and quarterback locked up at this point.
Yeah, I think the running backs fall off a cliff really quickly when you get to this point in your draft. So I'm probably going to take a running back here, and depending on what happens after this pick, it might be the last running back I take in the draft. There's a lot of good names in this range, though. You got your Ronald Jones, Melvin Gordon, Damian Harris are definitely in consideration as well. And then you've got, Zach Moss, James Conner, these guys that are going to get carries, could get some touchdowns, but don't really necessarily possess huge upside. But then you have that upside range of A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard. You could even throw Jamal Williams in that category. I have DeAndre Swift. I'm not really a huge fan of reaching on handcuffs in draft stuff, so I'm going to pass on that. So I am looking at running back here, and it's tough. I can't really decide on whether I should go with one of these stable floor names like a Rojo or even a Damian Harris. I think Harris might have a little upside in his own right. And on the flip side, I could go with an A.J. Dillon or a Tony Pollard and really shoot for the moon with that upside. So I am really struggling here. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and lock in A.J. Dillon. And I know he's a little bit down the board here, and I'm taking him in front of guys like Damian Harris, in front of guys like Ronald Jones, Melvin Gordon, guys with more secure roles in their offense. But the reason I'm taking A.J. Dillon is what we talked about at the beginning. Depth is less important for me, and I want guys that can win me the league. I love Ronald Jones. If this was a 14-team league and I needed an RB4, he'd be the smash pick for me here because I would need that secure role and that fill-in, that bye-week fill-in, injury fill-in, whatever it is. But it's not, and I think I can find running back depth elsewhere. I already do have 3 on my roster, and A.J. Dillon not only has touchdown upside with Aaron Jones as the lead back, but if something happens to Aaron Jones, if he misses any games, it is a 17-game season this year, so guys are going to be in and out of the lineup. You just have to expect that. A.J. Dillon is a smash, must-start, top 12 running back, maybe top 10 running back every single week Aaron Jones doesn't play. So obviously we want these guys to stay healthy, but chances are people are going to miss time. And I think if that's the case, A.J. Dillon propels himself into league-winning territory. And even as is, I think you can plug him in and hope for a touchdown. Hopefully you don't have to do that in a 10-team league, but that's why I'm going with Dillon here late in this draft.
I love the spice on this one. I think a lot of people are going to disagree, and that's why I love it. You got to go against the grain in a lot of these drafts if you're going to win. If you just do what everyone else does, you're going to get the same results as everyone else, and only one person in your league is going to win the championship. So I like the zig when everyone zags there. I probably would have gone Damian Harris, but Alex, let's talk about Harris for a second. I mean, we saw Ramondre Stevenson get some work and actually look really, really good in the preseason. Not going to overreact to that. But Sony Michel's still there. James White is there. Is the fade on Damian Harris for you just the fact that even if he does become the RB1 in that depth chart, he's still going to be splitting a lot of carries?
Yeah, you and I have talked about Harris a lot, and I was a lot higher on him, and I've been kind of declining as the season's gotten closer. And it's similar to the Tampa Bay situation right now because the reason we don't love Ronald Jones isn't because we don't think he's talented. I know he's a pass catching liability, but we love his talent on the ground. We don't love Ronald Jones in a great offense because Leonard Fournette's there to take some carries and some touchdowns. Giovanni Bernard is there now to take some work through the air. So it's kind of similar in New England with Damian Harris. Like, he's not a pass catching back, similar to Rojo. You still have Sony Michel there lurking, who could take some carries and some touchdowns. Might get cut as camp goes on, so keep an eye out for that. But even if he does get cut, you have Ramondre Stevenson, who could play kind of that Leonard Fournette type of role, taking some carries away. Then you have James White as the pass-catching back. Not to mention the offense is much worse. If Cam Newton's the starter, he's taking a lot of that goal line short yardage work away. And if Mac Jones is the starter, could be good for Damian Harris, but still a rookie quarterback. So that's kind of why I'm fading Damian Harris. There is a chance that he has a bigger workload, percentage of carries than a guy like a Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette, but that's kind of the overall feeling for me. I think the upside is a little bit capped because of a bad offense and Cam Newton / rookie quarterback, insert starter here, whether it's Mac or Cam.
Now, I do think Harris has more potential than you might think. Like, I do think he can be that pass-catching 3-down workhorse, but you're right. I mean, when's the last time we saw that out of New England? Seems like this is a fallacy every single season. We all get sucked into, some big plays in the preseason. We go, oh, New England's going to have an RB1 this year. Go and draft him. And then, at best, maybe you're hoping for LeGarrette Blount with 18 touchdowns. But we saw a ton of receivers go off the board after you took that A.J. Dillon flyer. It's Jarvis Landry, Will Fuller, who I love at this range, Jalen Waddle, who I love at this range, and Marvin Jones, who I love in this range. All are great names in these double-digit rounds. All have tremendous upside, and I'm rising steadily on Jalen Waddle. Had a lot to say negatively about him in the draft process, but for 2021, Waddle could easily just take over and be the one if things break his way. But I get 2 picks here at the 10-10 and the 11-01. The first pick is easy because it's a guy I've been talking about all season, banging the table for this guy. It's Curtis Samuel. Now, nice. I'm not worried about the fact that I already have Antonio Gibson, and I actually think the Washington football team is really going to surprise some people this year. And you have a head coach and an offensive coordinator that have worked with Curtis Samuel before in Carolina. They go out and sign him, bring him in free agency, and the guy's still only 24 years old, still ascending in his career. We saw him have almost 20 carries last season, 97 targets. So I expect him to go from this, he was productive in a wide receiver 3 role in Carolina. Why would he not absolutely smash as the bona fide wide receiver 2 behind Terry McLaurin and an offense that should be able to push the ball downfield with Ryan Fitzmagic? So Curtis Samuel's the easy pick for me there. Super excited for him. I have him on pretty much every roster going into 2021. And man, this is a tough one. There's a lot of names I like here. Damian Harris, who we've talked about. I kind of want to take the upside shot on him. Jalen Hurts is a guy I've been all over this year, and he's falling hard in this draft. Same thing with Ryan Tannehill and Trevor Lawrence. Those are names I think we can circle back on later. And no one really stands out to me necessarily at the wide receiver position. Corey Davis isn't all that exciting. Darnell Mooney, maybe if Justin Fields starts the season and it really is the guy that we expect him to be, but I don't want to bank on a rookie QB going out and helping a undersized field stretcher deliver a monster fantasy season. So I'm just going to take best available here that I see, and that's Damian Harris. And I'm just going to take that gamble that he will become the 3-down workhorse in New England. We did see him have some big games last year, even when Cam Newton was the starter. Yes, there's concerns about just the running back role in New England altogether, but might as well take the flyer on it because after him, it's Tony Pollard, Gus Edwards, and not much else to like.
Yeah, and look, it sounds like I hate Damian Harris, but what is this, the 11th round? By all means, I would take him in a more dire situation if there weren't some of these other running backs on the board. I would totally be willing to take him in the 10th, maybe even the back of the 9th round. Or mid-9th round for that matter, in one of these 10-team leagues. I think a tremendous value on Damian Harris there. But I'm back on the clock, and actually a couple of the running backs I thought would dry up in terms of depth are still available. So I might go ahead and take advantage of that, get another running back on this roster, and circle back to wide receiver a little bit later. Ronald Jones is still there. I've been a huge supporter of Ronald Jones since we've been doing the show. Tony Pollard is definitely an interesting name. Gus Edwards is an interesting name as well. But I'm just going to go ahead, similar to you, Steph, take a good value here and take best available. It's Rojo. I know I mentioned I don't necessarily need that stable depth on this roster. But in the 11th round, to get a guy who is going to be involved in this offense, who has touchdown upside, and honestly, we've talked about this in the past, for Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones, if one or the other misses time, the guy that's still standing is going to be close to must-start territory, depending on how deep your league is and how deep you are running back. So I'm going to take Rojo. If something happens and I get in a huge pinch, someone I feel okay about starting. And then he does have upside if some of that backfield clutter clears out a little bit in Tampa Bay and he's able to take on a bigger workload. We saw it last season, had back-to-back games of 100 or more yards and was really, really effective for a long stretch with Leonard Fournette sidelined. So Rojo is the pick here, and it really just comes down to a tremendous value late in this draft.
And you guys notice that in these double-digit rounds, we are going for a lot of running backs. You know, typically in like a 12-team or 14-team league, we see a lot more of these running backs dry up. And then in this range, we're stuck going for upside wide receivers. Maybe you go ahead and take your tight end flyer or a late-round QB like a Trevor Lawrence at this range. But in this 10-team league, having a running back that explodes and just ends up being an RB1, again, we can think about guys like Jonathan Taylor last year, guys in the past like Miles Sanders that have just kind of come out of nowhere and turned on the burners late in the season and made that playoff push for a lot of fantasy gamers. That's the vein of guys that we're taking here. And running backs are a lot easier to project than wide receivers because there's typically, only one or two running backs, and they're going to get, all the carries in the usage. Whereas with receivers, they're competing with tight ends. There's 3 or maybe even 5 of them on some of these rosters that are super deep. I think like Arizona Cardinals, they got a ton of guys that are going to get targets one way or another. So it's easier to just go with running back for that more secure volume, which also adds to that upside ceiling as well. But after you went Rojo, Zach Moss went off the board, a guy that I would have loved to follow me back at this 12-13 turn. Wasn't going to happen, I guess. Ryan Tannehill, Pittsburgh Steelers defense. McCole Hardman, yuck. Logan Thomas, Henry Ruggs, Noah Fant, Darnell Mooney. Look, guys, don't draft McCole Hardman. Like every single year we get excited for him, and yes, he does have like week-to-week upside, sure, but season long, we've seen what McCole Hardman is at this point. But Alex, back to you at the 12:05. Probably going to go with an upside wide receiver here if I had to guess.
Yeah, it's a good guess, and I'm definitely tapped out at running back. I feel good about Mixon, Swift, Edmonds, Rojo, A.J. Dillon. Wide receiver right now, I've got Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Cortland Sutton, Laviska Shenault, so definitely feeling really strong there as well. I am going to get a receiver with one of my last 2 picks, but typically I would take another quarterback flyer with my last bench spot in a draft, typically a Justin Fields, a Trevor Lawrence, a Trey Lance, but Jalen Hurts has fallen way too far, and I'm going to go ahead and take the value here in the 12th round. Look, I know I already have Lamar Jackson, but this is Stef and I's MO this season. Like, take it, no matter who your quarterback is, whether you do get that value on one of the tier 1 guys or whether you end up going late QB, with one of those last picks, secure an upside QB, give yourself an opportunity to have that upside at your quarterback slot late in a draft. Like, if I pick a guy in this round and he sucks, I'll cut him. But if it's a Justin Fields, a Trey Lance, in this case a Jalen Hurts, if those guys hit, if those guys come out and they are what we think they could be, not only are they themselves a very valuable trade chip, but who knows, if Jalen Hurts comes out and he hits this year, maybe I just start him and I trade Lamar Jackson for an absolute haul from another team that wants an upside QB. So it just gives you options if you have 2 upside quarterbacks on your roster. And this Jalen Hurts value, like, I don't know what's going on.
I can't believe it.
I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just the 10-team league because a lot of these teams already have at least 1 quarterback. Some have 2. But Jalen Hurts here in the 12th round, just an absolute steal. I'm going to see what I have very, very quickly through the first 2-3 weeks. If he's not performing, I can get rid of him and grab somebody else.
Yeah, that value on Hurts is absolutely insane, and that would have been my pick instantly if he would have made it there. And he is falling in a lot of drafts and a lot of home leagues where people think, like, Hurts is going to get benched for whatever, like,
For
the
Flacco.
Eagles are in on him as the guy. Joe Flacco is not going to be the answer for them. And I thought Hurts looked really good in the preseason. He was kind of holding back as far as taking off. when he was sitting in the pocket. Obviously, in preseason, you're not trying to get tackled as a quarterback. So once the reins come off of Hurts, I think it's going to be nothing but boom upside every single week. We saw it last year. I expect him to continue to improve. Hopefully, Devonta Smith can be that dude for him. But now I'm back on the board, and still a lot of interesting names. I know I'm going to have kicker and defense as my last 2 picks, so this is essentially the last time that I'm going to be picking in this draft. So to Alex, to your point, the whole spiel you just went on about taking these upside QBs, but I'm going to go ahead and take some upside shots at wide receiver here before I get into kicker and defense. The first one, and this is probably going to be a hot take to a lot of people, is Emmanuel Sanders. And the reason is because he has a proven track record on an offense that runs a lot of plays, runs a lot of pass plays, and could easily be like a clear set it and forget it wide receiver 2, assuming good health, behind Stephon Diggs. Like, none of the tight ends in Buffalo scare me at all. We know Devin Singletary and Zach Moss have had their struggles last season as well. We do expect good things for Zach Moss this year, but Sanders could easily be a guy that sees triple-digit targets and has boom upside every single week. And the downfield burner role is what he's always played. So if I get a proven veteran who gets high-value passes in an offense, I'll smash on that all day here in the 12th round, back of the 12th round in a 10-team league. Let's go for one more upside wide receiver. And this one's going to be Russell Gage, a guy that is on a super high passing offense. Like, they're going to throw the ball a ton in Atlanta this year. Their defense isn't going to turn it around in one season. They lost Julio. Somebody's got to fill in all that massive target share that Julio's leaving there, about 25% target share. 25% of that pie is available for the taking in Atlanta, and Ridley hasn't exactly been the most healthy guy every single year of his career. So Gage is a guy that I think could take over. I like Gage a lot as a prospect, and he's kind of been one of these perennial waiver names in these 12-team, 14-team leagues. I'm going to go and grab him just as a bench stash and a guy that could, end up filling in for me on bye weeks or if I run into some injuries, whatever it might be, because I don't need any more running backs at this point, and it's just a depth play here. So after Gage goes Rondale Moore, who would have been another great upside wide receiver name, James Conner, Tony Pollard, probably a guy that you were eyeing there in Pollard, and then Jamal Williams. So back to you with the 1306. After this, we're getting into kicker and defense territory. So who's going to be your last upside piece at the end of your bench?
Steph, I'm going to shock you here, and I'm picking a defense, okay? Because here's the thing. There's at this point in drafts, it's lottery tickets at wide receiver, and there's so many I like on the board right now. I like the upside on Elijah Moore. I like Terrace Marshall. I like Paris Campbell, Brian Edwards, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, one of those guys is getting back to me next round. And while while kicker is definitely a crapshoot every single year, I think there's ways to be strategic about defense coming out of drafts. And in this exact situation where I'm not taking a defense in round 9 like some psychopath, I can just take him a round early to get that first pick compared to everybody else, to get that first choice, because it actually can be a difference maker in your league. And I typically don't look at the actual defense necessarily. I look at the matchups. And there's one that stands out to me this year, and they actually happen to have a really strong defense, which is why I'm reaching on them. It's the Denver Broncos. One, their defense is fantastic. They pick up, Kyle Fuller at cornerback, Ronald Darby at cornerback. They draft Patrick Surtain in the top 10. Von Miller is back as a pass rusher. Bradley Chubb is still there. So this defense on paper should be a top 10, if not a top 5 unit on the course of the 2021 season. And I look at the schedule. I always want to look at the week 1 schedule. I don't want to draft the Browns defense, although I think the Browns have a tremendous defense, because guess what? They play Kansas City week 1. That does you no good. So I'm going to pick the Denver Broncos because, 1, they have a good unit. 2, they play the New York Giants in week 1, and a turnover-prone Daniel Jones, who, even if he has a good game, he's going to probably turn the ball over a couple times. He's going to get sacked, and it gets better for the Denver Broncos. Typically, I just look at week 1, but Denver in week 2 is at Jacksonville. They're playing against a rookie quarterback. In week 3, they're playing the New York Jets, another rookie quarterback. So you pick up Denver, you could have one of the top 5 defenses in fantasy football for the first 3 weeks of the season. In week 4, they play the Baltimore Ravens, and we know they're going to play the Chargers twice this year, the Chiefs twice this year in division. So I'm going to draft the Broncos here. I'm going to start them week 1, week 2, and week 3. And I have no problem going ahead and cutting bait at that point and finding another defense to stream. So Believe it or not, the Broncos is the pick. That's probably the most defense analysis you're going to get on the show, but I feel like it's fairly valuable. Just remember, the Denver Broncos are one of the best, if not the best, defense to target out of drafts this season, and it didn't hurt me at all. My prediction was correct. All the receivers I was looking at made it back to me anyway, and just because, I could go with the homer pick and Paris Campbell, but I feel like I've talked about him enough. I probably would go Paris Campbell if this was my actual draft, but I'm going to go Bryan Edwards, just an upside shot on the Vegas Raiders. He's gotten all sorts of training camp hype this season, is poised to be starting on the outside and really take over that wide receiver 1 role in Vegas. He's been said to be a great red zone threat. He's getting compared to T.O. So I'm going to lock in Edwards and see what he does the first couple weeks of the season. And that'll be a wrap for me outside of my kicker in round 15.
Edwards has one of the earliest breakout ages of all time. This kid was so good in college at age 17, like mossing people. So while the hype hasn't necessarily been there from what he's done on the field with Bryan Edwards, he's such an interesting prospect that truly has a ceiling that I don't think a lot of people give him credit for. But after Edwards, we saw 2 more defenses in the Ravens and the Colts, both of the guys that I was eyeing there. Tariq Cohen went off the board, and Justin Tucker. So, one thing I want to throw out there, when you're in these drafts, you don't have to, and a lot of them, you got to check your rules and make sure. And a lot of them, you actually don't have to fill up the entirety of your roster. Something I like to do, especially at this early in the season, injuries happen, cuts happen, trades get made by these NFL teams. I like to continue hitting wide receiver and running back at this point, maybe even QB. I could go with the Fields or Lance here, but I'm going to make the assumption in this particular draft, we do have to go ahead and get that kicker and defense just to complete our rosters. But just always something to keep in mind there. It's a kind of a cheat code as a way to extend some depth and go ahead and beat a lot of people to the waiver wire heading into week 1, week 2. But let's see what defenses are here. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And one I really like that's here, has a great week 1 matchup, are the San Francisco 49ers. They play the Detroit Lions in week 1, an offense that I'm not expecting is to do anything crazy. I'm hoping that Trey Lance can start for the 49ers here because it should put teams into some tough game scripts where they're going to need to pass the ball and where we can have Bosa, we can have a bunch of studs, Buckner getting in there, making plays, hitting quarterbacks in the pocket because they do need to pass so much. So I'm hoping really with this pick that 49ers offense can actually help their defense go out and put up more fantasy points. It's kind of an interesting little play there. You can kind of bank on that strategy at worst. So just go for a high-flying offense like Kansas City Chiefs defense is always a great fallback option for you. Another reason why I like the Washington football team defense this year because they have a great unit and they should be able to put teams into some tough game scripts where they always need to pass. But my next pick here, I don't know. I don't want to overanalyze kicker. I'm gonna go with Tyler Bass. I'm all about that base, all about that bass at this point in the draft. And really, I'm just going with the offense. I think the Buffalo Bills could be one of the highest scoring offenses in the league this year on the reins of Josh Allen. And not much more needs to be said other than that. I mean, when it comes down to kicker, really it's just playing the matchups every single week. But at worst, you can just bank on a high-flying defense or offense that you expect to put up points.
I'm going homer pick with my kicker since Younghoe Koo got sniped for me, and I'm going with Rodrigo Blankenship for my Indianapolis Colts.
Nice.
To close this thing out.
Nicely done, man. I mean, usually we'll go through these at the end and say, things we would have done differently on our drafts, but honestly, dude, I feel like both of our rosters are absolutely loaded. Now that might be a 10-team thing. And I might be kicking myself for that Brandon Cooks pick. If Deshaun Watson doesn't end up playing, but that was the gamble I was willing to take, and we both took, I think, calculated gambles. We still got players that we're very excited about with Lamar Jackson, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, Amari Cooper on your roster. You also had Kelce there as well. I was able to get guys that I'm really excited about, like CMC, Antonio Gibson, Tyler Lockett, Javonte Williams, and ETN feels great with Damian Harris sitting there for me. Curtis Samuel's been a my guy all year, so I feel like this 10-team league kind of opened things up a little bit, and we can go and circle our guys in these drafts. Alex, anything to add before we sign off?
Yeah, I think really quickly, let's just roll through our full roster. So my roster is Lamar Jackson at QB, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift at running back, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins at wide receiver, Travis Kelce at tight end, Cortland Sutton will be my flex, Then Broncos D and Rodrigo Blankenship. On my bench, I have Chase Edmonds, Jalen Hurts, Ronald Jones, Laviska Shenault, A.J. Dillon, and Bryan Edwards. Steph, your roster really quick. Russell Wilson at QB, Christian McCaffrey and Antonio Gibson at running back, Cooper Kupp and Tyler Lockett at receiver, Darren Waller at tight end. You've got Travis Etienne listed in the flex here, but then 49ers D and Tyler Bass/Bass. And then your bench, your other flex options, Javonte Williams, Brandon Cooks, Damian Harris, Curtis Samuel, Russell Gage, and Emmanuel Sanders. So I love both of these rosters that we got rolling here in this 10-team league. We both got the quarterbacks with upside, the tight ends with upside. And these 10-team leagues are fun. If you've got more questions about this draft, why we picked certain players, passed on certain players, join that Discord in the link below. We're happy to answer all of those questions and also help you win your leagues this season.
Hit that Discord link in the description down below. We got 100 strong active in our community. Got big announcements coming soon. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button on YouTube. That is huge for us. Keep things moving forward. We appreciate y'all listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Peace.